Hey everyone, this is Sandy Petersen and I have great news. We have finally finished our stretch goals to get the full Moon faction in the game. This is added to the Empires box, and now the Empires box has 4 empires. Sea, Invisible God, Earth, and Moon. You can all play Moon. So let's talk about Moon now that we have added it to the list. So Moon is understandably weird. I mean, it sounds like a weird element, right? Its most weird thing is that it doesn't, instead of having a special unique ability and a weakness, it only has one ability which is also a weakness. It's good and bad for it. And this is the lunar cycle. And I'm really hoping that right now on the green screen we're showing a diagram of the lunar cycle. You can see it has 4 parts. There's the dying moon, the waxing half moon, the full moon, and the waning half moon. It kind of goes in a circle. So the way this works is you have a counter that you put on the lunar cycle. At the start of the game, you put it wherever you want on the cycle. It doesn't matter. I mean, I guess it matters, but it's up to you. Any player, including you, as an action, can pay 1 power and advance the lunar cycle. You see there's arrows in it showing the direction it goes. It only goes that direction. So, for example, if it is currently at the waning half moon, then any player can pay a power and bop it down to the dying moon. Now usually it's you as moon pain to move it around because you're the one that cares most about it. But if you've been at full moon for a while, which other players hate, don't be surprised if one of them invests the money to knock you down a notch. Sometimes a couple of them will go together on it and say, I'll knock him down one if you knock him down. Let's get Moon out of the offer catbird seat. So the lunar cycle goes around. It can be advantage, it can be disadvantage. It's the lunar cycle. We'll be talking about it more during the course of this because it's really key to Moon. And so Moon sometimes is seen in the game as kind of like navel gazing. They're focused on the lunar cycle. They are doing lots of things to mess with their players, but they are very internally aware of this cycle that they always have to deal with, which makes you feel like Moon. Okay, so Moon has 3 building types: shrines, temples, ziggurats. And the special ability of their temples and ziggurats is that when you build a temple or a ziggurat, you also advance the lunar cycle 1 step. Now, sometimes that's good for you, sometimes it's bad. It just is. That's what happens when you build those buildings. Usually it's good though, or you can plan to make it good. Now, they have 4 kinds of units, like most factions. They have assassins are the core unit. They're minions, rather. Now, assassins, like all minions, cost 1, but their attack depends on the lunar phase. This is true of all your units. So, during the dying moon, the attack of your assassins is 0. During the half moon, it's 1, and during the full moon, it's 2. Now, in general, what you'll note is that during the dying moon, Moon's units have crappy attacks. During the half moon, they're about the same as everyone else, and during the full moon, they're better. So obviously Moon likes to be a full moon, everyone else prefers Moon to be at dying moon, but that's kind of how the lunar goes. So let's talk about the hero, the Crimson Bat, one of my favorite figures in the game. The Crimson Bat costs 3. During the dying moon, he has a combat of 1, which is terrible. During the half moon, it's 3, and during the full moon, it's a terrifying 5. That's really good for a hero. He doesn't always roll those dice, and we'll get to that in a minute, but when he doesn't, it's because something even worse is happening. The Selines are their lesser gods. I like the way that the Selines have 2 sides to them. One's like the happy side, one's the dark. It kind of shows the dual nature of the lunar way. Now, Selines have the same combat as assassins. In other words, 0 during the dying moon, 1 during the half moon, 2 during the full moon. So in full moon, they're really good. During, the dying moon, they're, sucktastic. That's how it is. Finally, we have the red goddess, Sedenia. Now, she costs 4, and you have to have a temple in play. As always, you don't have to summon her at the temple, you just have to have a temple somewhere. And you always do, because you're building temples to advance the lunar cycle, right? So her combat is the same as a bat. It's 1 in dying, 3 in half, 5 in full. And her ability is called Menses. And it happens after a battle. If the red goddess is in the battle, then after the battle, you advance the lunar cycle. This is too late to affect the battle, but it lets you advance it again. So in effect, when you build, the purpose of building temples and doing battles with the red goddess is to advance that cycle for free. Otherwise you gotta pay a power. And I mean, the battle, you have to pay a power to do the battle, but you're also advancing the cycle as a free bonus. So you wouldn't want to battle just to advance the cycle, but it's like a freebie. So, and there's reasons that in the game you want to be advancing that cycle and moving it around at a good clip. So we'll get into those in a bit. The reasons based on your gifts, of course. And with that, we're going to talk about her hero quest, which is how you get the gifts. Okay, 3 of your hero quests are based on the lunar cycle. If at the start of the power phase, the lunar cycle is at the dying moon, then you get a gift. Yay! If at the start of the power phase, the lunar cycle is at the half moon, you also get a gift and you get 2 extra power, which is pretty sweet. So that power can be handy to you to have, a little boost that one on your game. Now the third is, at the start of the power phase, if the lunar phase cycle is at the full moon, you get 4 power. So that's also pretty great, and that's 3 of your gifts are simply planning your cycles to be the right phase during the power phase. You have to end the action phase with it being there. Now sometimes a nasty player will see that you're going to be earning a gift next turn, so they'll do something to punk you by advancing the cycle. You just have to kind of deal with that or do the best you can. Usually you're able to get all 3 gifts. Now one interesting thing about these gifts, although they're pretty easy to get, you're certain to get one of them on the first power phase, because it's going to be one of the lunar cycle areas, right? But the interesting feature about these is that you can't get them very fast because only 1 per power phase is all you get. So they're kind of spaced out, which kind of slows that part of your progress. But on the other hand, it's a steady pace of doing it, and when you get them all 3, you'll have 6 extra power as a result, which you can use to do fun things with, so it's kind of worthwhile. Okay, there are other hero quests. They get one for placing the ziggurat, which they want to do anyway because it lets them proc the lunar cycle, and they get one for summoning the red goddess. Everyone with the greater god usually gets it for the greater god. They have one for that, and the final one they get is no moon temples are in your pool. That means you've placed all 3 of them. So usually you place all your moon temples before you place your ziggurat. It's just easier to make sure you get that gift. Not always. Sometimes you want that ziggurat because it gets a gift too, and it's pretty cool to have. But be aware that the placing the moon temples is good. That means you have to have at least 3 areas for those moon temples. Ideally 4 areas, so you have the moon temples and a shrine, so you get more power. Let us discuss the lunar gifts and what they're like. They have some really bizarre gifts that are super fun to do. Here is an interesting movement gift they have. It's called Adoption. It's an action that only costs 1. They choose an area that contains enemy units. Then they swap all the enemy's units in that area, well not all of them, 1 for 1 with your own units in another area. For example, if they have 4 units in their area and you have 3 in yours, then 3 of their units come to your area and all yours go there. If on the other hand they had 3 units and you had 4, then all 3 would go to your area and 3 of yours would go there. Basically you're swapping the position of the 2 armies. If the armies are equal in size, you swap them all, but often there's an imbalance and only some of them get to go. Now, you can't use Adoption to move units into or out of hell. So it doesn't work for that, so you can't get the sun god out. Too bad. But you can use it to move an enemy greater god, but if you move a greater god with it, it costs 2 power instead of 1, just so you know. Oh, one note about the lunar tactics. I've already mentioned this. Although you can't use Adoption to get the sun god out of hell, during the full moon, even your minions have a combat of 2, which means they can get the sun god out of hell with permission. So you can get him out of hell pretty early if you want. And this is actually kind of symbolic of the alliance between moon and sun that happens during the Third Age, but it doesn't always happen, and moon may not want to get you out of hell, so don't rely on that sun god. Now you know. Okay, the next gift, Eclipse. After any player's action, and this is not an action, this is just you do after a player's action, even if you're out of power, you can immediately advance the lunar cycle a step. Okay? Then you flip this card face down to show that you can't use it again in this action phase. Next council phase, you flip it face up again, so you can use it every turn. Once a turn, you can advance the lunar cycle for free. Okay, so you can advance it for free when the red goddess is in a battle. You can advance it for free when you build a temple or a ziggurat, and you can advance it for free once with Eclipse. Now, one of the advantages of the Eclipse one is if the enemy players are being big jerks and trying to keep you from getting your cycle gifts, you can hold Eclipse in reserve, and then when the last one of them runs out of power, then trigger Eclipse to move 1 extra space. It makes it a lot harder for them to plan things so you can't get your gifts. So that's a useful thing. Also, you can use it just before you attack someone to surprise, I went from half moon to full, now the attack's going to be all terrifying. And it wasn't an action, see? Because Eclipse is not an action. So you can up it to full moon and attack, and they usually don't like that very much, but you do, which is what we care about. Okay, we're going to talk about their enslavement ability. And how this works is you have a slave box on your faction sheet. And when you do a battle, all units that you rout, not kill, but rout, all the routed units are removed from the map and you put them in your slave pen. Now they're not dead, but they also don't rout, they just go to your slave pen. Now the owner can pay 1 power after any player's action, in other words, it's not an action for them, they do it after an action, to rescue one of their slave units and put it at any of his buildings. Or he can pay, now by the way, that power he pays goes to you. He's paying you power to place that unit. Or he can pay a victory point to you to take all of the units in the slave box and place them all at his buildings. Okay? So what this means is that if you've routed a lot of his units, you have a big pile of guys, probably he'll play the victory point and get them all back next time he needs them. If he only has 1 or 2 units, he'll probably pay you the power at some time. But anyway, it's always awkward. They hate having the units routed. It's another motivation to go into battle and route units. And it's kind of interesting because it means the lunar empire, unlike many, is kind of not as happy when it kills guys. It would rather just route them because then they go to the slave box and you can get power, you can get gifts out of that. Okay, we will now discuss the Crimson Bat's, your heroes, his special gift. It's called Mind Blast. And this is the reason you may not want to roll dice for the Crimson Bat, because when the Crimson Bat's in a battle, you can choose to subtract the Crimson Bat's combat from the enemy's total instead of adding it to yours. So for example, say it's half moon, the Crimson Bat's combat is 3. Instead of adding 3 dice to your total, you subtract 3 dice from the enemy. Now in a game with the number of dice you roll in God's War, often that means you can actually blank out the enemy so they're not rolling any dice at all. They usually hate that pretty bad. And it means you can be safe. If he's full moon, it can blank out 5 points of him, or you can add 5. No matter what, it's a good thing. And so it makes the Crimson Bat a really terrifying hero. And it's good both protectively and to seal the deal on an attack. It makes it a lot safer for you to send the Red Goddess into battle too, because with the Crimson Bat along, the enemies are going to be rolling less dice, everything's good. Okay. Madness. This is your Selene's gift. And unlike most lesser gods, the Selene gift doesn't boost them in combat. It's an outside of combat thing. And the way it works is, when the lunar cycle hits full moon, you get 1 power for each area that has a Selene. And if you have any Selenes, you get a rune. So for example, if you've got 3 Selenes in 3 areas, then when you go to full moon, you get 3 power and a rune. Now, this ability, obviously you want to keep doing it and pumping yourself up, but you can't use it if at least 2 players are at 0 power. So, so when the other players run out, then like the well runs dry for Madness. But until then, this is a pretty awesome thing to try to do. Now, here's the deal. If you're at full moon, it costs 4 power to route it back again to full moon just by paying the route. Now you'll get 3 power for that if the Selenes are spaced out properly, and you get a rune. So in effect, you're paying 1 power for a rune, but you're doing nothing for 4 actions in a row. So it's better if you can do it by building temples, or by going into combat, or by using Eclipse. But there it is. It's one of the ways that the Lunars can navel gaze. And of course, if other guys want to break up your rune gaining machine and your power gaining machine, then they can go in there and attack your Selenes and kill them, or route them into the same areas and do things. It means your Selenes are always beneficial. It never hurts to have your Selenes in play when you go to full moon. Even if you only have 1 Selene in play, that's a power and a rune, so what the heck, right? Okay. Your final ability is the one that makes Moon the most beloved of Moon players, but not others, and this is Moonburn. It costs 1 power. The Red Goddess has to be in play, so it's kind of associated with her, but it's not a combat ability. Instead, if it's at the half moon, if it's at the dying moon, you can't use it. At the half moon, you can destroy a shrine or a chaos nest. You just pick on it and go, it fries. Okay. Now, if it's an embedded chaos nest, of course, it flips over to the regular side. It's not killed, right? But I mean, it's hurt. And then at full moon, it can destroy a temple, or of course, a castle or a tower for the invisible god, because those count as temples. So at full moon, you're destroying well, for 1 power, you're taking out temples. And you can imagine how excited they are about that. Now, the destroyed building goes into the Moonburn box. What that means is the other player can't replace it until the next power phase when you return it to him. Or he can spend 1 power to get it out immediately. So he can't just replace it right away. And the reason for this is that when you're destroying shrines, otherwise they get pay a power. You pay a power to burn the shrine, they pay a power to get it back. But if you're using Moonburn, you pay a power to burn the shrine, it goes into the Moonburn box, and then they can't replace it unless they have something else in their pool. Or if they do want to replace it, they got to pay a power, so it makes Moonburn more effective and more deadly. So that is the Moon faction with its weird lunar cycle and the various ways it can strike you from beyond and attack you from a distance and cause other trouble. I think you'll like it. It's really interesting. It's unlike any other faction, and I'm really happy that we reached this stretch goal. Thank you.